My most popular video on my YouTube channel, Living in Fort Collins, which by the way, thank you to everybody who subscribes and watches. It is time for a refresh. The pros and cons of living in Fort Collins, Colorado, 2022 edition. Now, if you haven't watched the original version, definitely go check that out after this video. But today, we are going to talk about the top 5 pros and top 5 cons with some honorable mentions on both about living in Fort Collins. So stick around and enjoy a remake of my most popular video. Enjoy. What's up everybody, my name is Patrick Soukup with Soukup Real Estate, and this is Pros and Cons of Living in Fort Collins 2022. We are going to start off with the cons of living in Fort Collins, and here are some honorable mentions. Now, these cons come from people that have discussed with me like, oh man, this really sucks. This is from my 33 years experience living on this earth. And also what friends and family have discussed, what they maybe do not like about living in Fort Collins, or some of the things that they would prefer not to be here. So one of them is the population growth. We are definitely a growing community, and there are some older generations here in town that would prefer Fort Collins to not grow so much. And there are some benefits and some, not so much benefits that come along with population growth. But population growth, the next one is cow manure smell and duck pond. There's some funky smells that can happen in Southeast Fort Collins, which is actually my favorite place to live in Fort Collins. But if the weather is just right and the winds are just right, you can smell the cow manure from Greeley, as well as if you are really far southeast, Fort Collins, Fossil Lake Ranch, for instance, you could potentially smell duck pond, which there is a water treatment plant right nearby, so you can guess kind of what it smells like. North-facing driveways used to be on the top 5 list, but really it's kind of just like more of like a pro tip. North-facing driveways in Fort Collins, if it snows, it's cold, it is definitely going to have frozen driveways unless you get out there and shovel right away. Now, just recently, Fort Collins and Loveland had the Fort Collins Loveland Airport launch Velo Airlines, which I really, really hope sticks around. But when I created the video in 2020, the winter of 2020 for the pros and cons video, that was not anything that was necessarily being discussed. So I had a con of the airport being 50 to 60 minutes away, but so long as you're going to 2 destinations, which one of them is where my in-laws live, so thank you, you could actually go to Fort Collins Loveland Airport, which is literally 12 minutes away from my house, from leaving my door to parking and walking into the terminal at the Fort Collins Loveland Airport. But if you're going on an international flight or anything bigger than that, the airport is definitely a 50 to 60 minute drive. Thank goodness for E470 to cut a lot of that traffic and headache out. But definitely you are going to be driving, and your travel days are going to be long if you live in Fort Collins because of having to travel to the airport. And then finally, the honorable mention is no professional sports teams. Now, we do have Colorado State University, but we tend to be strong Broncos fans, Rockies, Avalanche, and Nuggets fans here in Fort Collins, or are definitely a hodgepodge of whoever else has moved here. But getting into the top 5 cons, let's start with number 1. Number 1, one of my things that I wish we had more of is top-notch eateries. Good chefs. We do have a ton of good options and places and restaurants to eat. At one point, when I was in middle school, there was always kind of the Fort Collins has the most restaurants per capita in the United States. I don't believe that is true, and I was actually have never been able to find that to verify that information. But I can tell you there are just not a ton of you have to go eat here's or this place is to die for. There are some of those, just not a lot. We've got Chimney Park in Windsor, we've got Ginger and Baker, we've got a couple of really good, fine places to eat, just not a lot of them. Number 2, and probably one of the most interesting places where I get comments on and discussion about, is the lack of diversity in Fort Collins. Now, one of the coolest things that has happened over this last year when I've been making this channel and working with a lot of people moving into the state and community is working with people of all different backgrounds. Brazilians, half white, half black, Hispanics, Latinos, European individuals from Latvia. So literally, it is actually a place where I think the diversity will continue to slowly change, and there will be more of a cultural background here in Fort Collins, but we are still predominantly white. And that's okay, because I think we are a very, very friendly community, open, welcoming, friendly. You know, we got jerks on all sides. We got extremists on all sides on everything politically, racially, you name it. I think no matter where you go, that is going to happen. But in general, I think Fort Collins is very welcoming, but it is a place where there is not a ton of diversity. And having a family that is of mixed race and having kids that are half white, half black, it is important to us that wherever they go in town, that they feel welcomed and don't necessarily stick out like a sore thumb, even though they will to a certain extent. They are some gorgeous kids, if I do say so myself. But the cool thing was, just recently, the Colorado put out an article that there are 30% of students in Poudre School District are non-white. I don't know necessarily what that means. Asian, black, white, yellow, green, blue, red, just not, I shouldn't say not included white in there, because 30% non-white in Poudre School District. But the teachers are all predominantly white. So Fort Collins, con number 2 is the lack of diversity, which I think is slowly but surely changing, as with everywhere, just based off of what is culturally accepted with black, white, gray, Asian, Hispanics, Indian, all meshing together, and it's okay for each other to love one another. So, con number 2, lack of diversity in Fort Collins. All right, con number 3, and this one actually just recently came out in the Coloradoan, and actually I had a couple comments on the page asking about the air quality in Fort Collins. And it turns out that specifically the northwest quadrant of Fort Collins does in fact have some air quality issues. What happens is, along the foothills, we have some colder temperatures there. We have the foothills, and we have oil and gases coming from Weld County, because we don't have a ton of operating wells in Larimer County, but coming from Weld County, as well as vehicle emissions, and they all get kind of caught up in this downward air pressure area in northwest Fort Collins. And there are times where the air quality is not great. I've looked at air quality on my phone, and you know, it suggests that the air quality is good in green, but there are articles that suggest the air quality specifically in northwest Fort Collins isn't all that great. Now, I do have friends that are very, very active that live in northwest Fort Collins and haven't made any type of comments or suggestions to support those findings. But again, that's kind of something that's really difficult to see, but it is something that has been discussed. So hopefully we can figure that out as we go forward. But it does lead into con number 4, which is wildfires here in Colorado, in northern Colorado, Colorado Springs. It felt like just over the last 2 to 3 years that they have happened relatively annually. We will always have fires in Colorado, but in northern Colorado, it felt like there was always about 6 to 8 years between bigger fires. But we have had some decent sized fires over the last years. We had Cameron Peak Fire, the Marshall Fire that you all probably saw about in the news, and per an article in Larimer County, it is something to be more expected with whether it's climate change or droughts, but it is a potential that there are more wildfires, which I am a perpetual optimist and positive thinker, and I really hope that not to be the case. As growing up here in Fort Collins, I never knew that to be an issue. Sure, there would be a fire every now and again, and it would be something that would stink, not fun, but we'd get through it. And so hopefully we can get back to that. But if it does become a perpetual, persistent issue in the summer months, that would not be much fun at all. So con number 4 is Larimer County and wildfires and potential for future wildfires. And con number 5, probably the thing that is talked about most is our housing costs, both rental and buying. Just like everywhere in the United States, our inventory is very, very down and demand is very, very high. So the prices continue to increase. Now, I can tell you that people coming from higher priced areas such as the Northeast, Northwest, West Coast, areas in Florida, Texas are coming with basically hungry eyes and, chomping at the bit to get at our relatively, prospectively affordable homes. Now, people who are coming from the Midwest, maybe some areas in the Southeast, are seeing our housing prices as astronomical and unattainable, unaffordable. Even people from here in Fort Collins aren't necessarily able to produce the incomes necessary to afford what would be an acceptable purchase price to income. That also goes with rental rates. Our rental rates are probably going to increase pretty dramatically here in 2022 and hamper an already expensive market. Between labor shortages, supply shortages, the process for permits, fees, all of those things that get passed on to the final buyer are increasing our housing costs. I don't see those prices coming down anytime soon. I know there are a lot of different resources out there that suggest that maybe it's a housing bubble, that maybe there's going to be a crash, and that is very possible. You never know. From what I'm seeing, I'm basing all of my perceptions on basic economics between supply and demand. There has to be a complete inverse of the two, where demand shoots down and supply dramatically increases for the prices to ultimately decrease. Currently, with what I'm seeing on a lot of the data that I'm looking at, I don't foresee that to be the case. So con number 5 is our housing prices here in Fort Collins in northern Colorado. Now, done with the bad stuff. If you can survive those 5 cons, which they are something to consider, and I really hope you do consider when you are considering buying or moving to Fort Collins or visiting. If those are things that you do your research on, understand, know a little bit better, and the pros that I'm about to list can offset some of those cons, well, maybe this is the place for you. So without any further delay, let's jump into some honorable mention pros. Alrighty, so some honorable mentions. The people who are moving here are some really cool people. Now, I've been fortunate to work with a ton of people that have moved to Fort Collins from all over the country. Chicago, North Dakota, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Georgia, all over the place, and they are all bringing different backgrounds. A lot of them are bringing very, very positive minds, and a lot of them are bringing some really entrepreneurial, job-producing employments with them, which is very, very cool. So there are some really cool people moving to Fort Collins, Colorado, which they are also contributing to the low crime, family-friendly, really friendly atmosphere that drives what is Fort Collins, Colorado. And another honorable mention is we are not a major metro. You are going to see some differences between what we have to offer and a place like Denver, or not necessarily Boulder, because Boulder is pretty small, but has some really, really major metro type feels to it. But Fort Collins, our traffic, yes, there's traffic, road construction, our population growth is there, but we are a very sprawled out community, and generally speaking, we are not a major metro, but have all of the benefits of a major metro, with also having a major metro only an hour away. Alrighty, so those are some honorable mention pros. Now, jumping into the 5 pros of living in Fort Collins. Fort Collins could be considered the Napa Valley of beer. We have tons of breweries, and probably the king of them all is New Belgium. Really what got microbreweries and small town breweries on the map, besides a Sam Adams type feel, it was New Belgium. And then from there we've got Odell's, Coopersmith's, Equinox, Horse and Dragon, Funkworks, Zwei Brewing, Prost, you name it. There are so many different small breweries, but very cool, with unique feels and tastes at all of them. And you could go sit on the patio at Odell's, or play some yard games at New Belgium, or have a burger on the patio and watch the fountains at Coopersmith's. So there's just really a cool atmosphere, vibe, and economy around breweries here in Fort Collins. Number 2, and one thing that I have personally enjoyed just over the last couple months, is we have a municipality unfunded fiber gigabyte speed internet. You can get anywhere between 1 and I think it's 200 gigabytes, or it's 1 and 50 gigabytes. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I personally just have 1 gigabyte and I spend $69 a month, including having the modem. And it's gigabyte speed internet in a gig economy that we are now living in. And it was really interesting. I did 2 live feeds on my YouTube channel. One when I was on Comcast, and I think I had 150 megabytes up and 150 megabytes down speed. And then a month later when I transitioned to the fiber connection internet, and if you compare the two, yes, I did upgrade my camera and I also upgraded some audio, but what it really came down to was the internet speed was just phenomenal and the clarity between the two. So when I hold my Zoom meetings, I need to upload or download my YouTube content to my computer, I'm able to enjoy very, very fast speeds with very, very little to no interruption. So number 2 Pro is the fiber gigabyte speed internet here in Fort Collins for very, very affordable. And you can't talk about Fort Collins, Colorado and a Pro without mentioning Old Town Fort Collins. So number 3, Old Town Fort Collins. It's where it all began. In the late 1800s, Fort Collins was a military outpost that then transitioned into farming community and then the college community and now where we are at today. But Old Town remains the heart and gem of what Fort Collins is. Whether you're going around and walking just down College Avenue, spending time at the Oak Street Plaza or the downtown Old Town Square, walking around enjoying buildings, having a beer and burger at Coopersmith's like we were just talking about, or having a drink down at the world-class bar social, Old Town Fort Collins is definitely one of the best places in the world, in my opinion. And you could talk about maybe not just my opinion, because there have been times where Fort Collins has been listed as one of, if not the best place to live. And if the best place to live is Fort Collins, Colorado, and the best place within Fort Collins is Old Town Square, well, and the best place in the world is the United States, if we're going that route, well, then the best place in the world is Old Town Square. All right. I'll get off my soapbox, but 100% Old Town Square, the buildings, the entertainment, the food, the drinks, you just gotta experience it yourself. So pro number 3, Old Town Square, Fort Collins. And if you come to Fort Collins, really what you're coming for is the lifestyle. So you are gonna come and experience the open spaces, the parks, the bike trails, and really see how clean, well kept, and how many options there are. The Twin Silos Park is one awesome park in Southeast Fort Collins. Fossil Creek Park, which is literally just to the south of my house that we walk all the time. Warren Park, Adora, Roland Moore, going down to City Park, or hopping on the Pooter Trail, Power Trail, Spring Creek Trail, or going up to the mountains and walking through Laurie State Park, or Horsetooth Mountain and having a hike there. Definitely, it is what Fort Collins is about, and there are no shortages of opportunities to spend outdoor time with your family and friends in those 300 days of summer. So number 4, parks, open spaces, walking, bike paths, you name it, you can't beat that. Which just really leads me into number 5, and the biggest pro of them all is the lifestyle. I can tell you that working with so many people from across the country, one of the main drivers, one of the things that drives people here the most is the lifestyle. We talked about a lot of these in Living in Fort Collins video 2022, but from not being a world conqueror in business and not feeling like you have to, small town reputation, the friendly atmosphere, positive feelings, 300 days of sun, spending time outdoors, having a college campus, having the kind of small-ish tech scene, but also the entrepreneurial mindset that CSU does allow for our students to have. It's just an amazing place to live, and I can tell you that that is the driver which drives people to Fort Collins, is the lifestyle. Get outdoors, go hike, bike, climb, enjoy the arts and culture. I can tell you, I am so very grateful that I live in Fort Collins, and my perspective is horrible because I don't have perspective of what it's like living anywhere else except Loveland, which is just 15 minutes to the south of here. And I only lived there for 9 months because I had to live back in Fort Collins. And so that is something to take into consideration when watching these videos, is where my perspective is coming from. And is that something that, I'm sugarcoating it? Sure, I love where I live, but take these into consideration for you, and hopefully you feel that this pros and cons video hit on some realistic cons, hit on some realistic pros, and weigh those for yourself. What do you think about Fort Collins? Comment down below. Share the video with somebody who might be interested in moving to Fort Collins or Colorado, or a friend that lives here, and say, is this guy full of shit? All right, maybe, but have a look, explore. So thank you for watching. If you are considering buying, selling, or investing here in Fort Collins, definitely give me a call, text, or an email. And if you haven't already, please smash the like button, comment, and maybe even subscribe if you want to learn more information about Fort Collins. Until next time, guys, thank you for watching these pros and cons of 2022 about living in Fort Collins. Take care.